Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, Surviving the Retail Apocalypse, Why Retailers Committed to Employee Engagement Are Winning. This event is being presented by HR Morning and is being sponsored by Achievers. A couple of housekeeping items before we get kicked off. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please type them into the chat box in the control panel. I have a dedicated timer here to keep me accountable to make sure that we're reserving around the last 15 minutes for questions. So please don't be shy. Lastly, please remember that it is a violation of our copyright to record. So, couple of agenda items. We're going to get kicked off with some introductions and then explore why employee engagement matters in retail now more than ever. And then we'll quickly talk about why saying recognition impacts engagement is grossly oversimplified. And then we're going to spend a bulk of the time really digging into our top 3 best practices of how recognition can impact engagement before we get into your questions. My name is Bree Harvey, and I'll be your moderator today. A couple of comments about myself. I spent the first several years of my career in talent acquisition before moving into onboarding and learning and development. I currently work for Achievers, which is an employee engagement and recognition platform. I've been working in our San Francisco office for about 4 years. And I do a lot of things, but a lot of my work is focused on our onboarding and training program for our customer-facing teams. One of the many things I love about my role is I have the opportunity to create and deliver training content focused around trends in human capital management and employee engagement strategies. I could not be any more thrilled for today's discussion because we work with a lot of best-in-class retailers, and we've spent an exorbitant amount of time and effort analyzing the data and reflecting on what best-in-class companies are doing to not just stay in business, but grow within the retail sector. And I firmly believe that success leaves clues, and I am so honored to have our 2 featured subject matter experts on today's call. Phoebe Licata, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your role.
Yeah, thanks, Bree. Hi, everybody. My name is Phoebe Licata, and I've been a customer success manager at Achievers for the past 3 years. What that really means is I'm partnering with a portfolio of clients to ensure that they're seeing the long-term success of the program for their business. I help to align their goals and around recognition as well as other business outcomes and create strategic plans in order to deliver on those metrics. So I'm really lucky to partner with such passionate people that work on to build a culture of recognition at their organizations, and Tara is absolutely one of them. Tara, would you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit more about Coborn?
Sure. Thanks for having me today. My name is Tara Grenov. I'm the Director of Learning and Development for Coborn, and work very closely with Phoebe, and am very excited to be featured today and talking about what we do to make our recognition platform work and what Achievers does to help us. As it so happens at Coborn's, under Learning and Development, we handle learning and development processes. We handle our learning management system. We, of course, develop trainings, but then we also oversee our recognition strategy, our engagement strategy, and succession. So that just is what L&D does at Coburn's. A little bit about Coburn's. We're a 98-year-old Midwest-based retailer with about 9,200 employees spread out over 130 locations in the Midwest. I'll have the opportunity to share about the evolution of our business, especially over the last decade or so, and how that's impacted our people strategy. But one thing that's unique about us is we are family-owned and have been from the beginning, and we are also an ESOP, so we are employee-owned. And I think one reason we've been resilient in this really volatile retail industry over the years is that because at our core, our mission is to empower our employee owners to create unique shopping experiences, anticipate needs, and exceed the expectations of our guests. And our focus on this mission is really evident when we look at our core values, which we've embedded into our recognition platform. And I'm really excited to share with you some of the ways we've been translating that back into business impact.
So, Tara, we're so excited to get into best practices. One thing that we were kind of talking about before we hopped on this call is that 2019 is a particularly interesting time to be an HR practitioner within the retail sector. 2018 left the industry with a lot to digest. A strong labor market and rising incomes have resulted in increased consumer confidence and spending. Last year was a record-breaking holiday season. And there are numerous brick and mortar stores such as Lululemon that have been experiencing explosive growth, like over 25% year over year. However, at the same time, a lot of retailers have been struggling, some closing their doors. There's been a lot of clamor and panic about how e-commerce is disrupting the industry. Some have been pointing to the high-profile bankruptcies of brands like Forever 21 and Blockbusters, claiming that we're on the dawn of the retail apocalypse. As Deloitte points out in their 2019 retail outlook, as everyone is placing their bets on what will separate the winners from the losers, two facts remain unchanged, and that's that the market is becoming increasingly saturated with options and competition, and consumers have more power than ever. They expect to have it all because they know they can have it all. They're more informed and expectant of businesses to instantly react to not just their needs, but their wants. It's not about getting more feet in the door. It's about enhancing the customer experience to get repeat business. And although there's lots of levers available to improve customer retention, such as post-purchase communications, customer loyalty programs, the most impactful controllable any business has to bolster the customer experience is ensuring you're creating an environment where people show up to work for a reason other than a paycheck. And this idea is not new. Back in the 90s, Harvard Business Review came out with this landmark model called the service profit chain. I'm sure most people are familiar with it or have been exposed to other findings that were influenced by this model, which basically captures the idea that, hey, if you want increased profit and stakeholder value, you have to first focus on the employee experience. When you have employees who are bought into your goals and are aligned to your values, when they're going through the motions of their job because they're genuinely motivated to do their best on behalf of the company, they're going to be a little more inclined to go out of their way to be helpful to customers, and the customers are then in turn going to be more likely to return, which then increases profit. However, like in most things in life, the reality can be more complicated than what academia would lead us to believe. It's not news to anyone on the line that working in retail can be a grind. When I was young, or when I should say when I was younger, Tara knows I still got it, but I'll never forget my experience working as a store manager and how draining it was between being on my feet for long hours, working holidays, nights, weekends, dealing with part-time employees, no showing to shifts all the time, unreasonable customer expectations, and expending so much energy just trying to convince associates who don't care to do their jobs. It's uniquely challenging to engage employees in the retail sector, especially with turnover being higher in retail than any other industry. According to a recent report by Korn Ferry, as unemployment remains at a 49-year low, turnover within retail specifically continues to trend upwards, which translates into more than 2 million hours and days of lost productivity, billions and billions of dollars and costs associated with recruiting, hiring, and training. The good news is that there is so much opportunity to control the controllables, whether it's improving customer satisfaction or moving the needle on retention. The common denominator lies within employee engagement. There's a ton of thought leadership supporting the idea that the key to customer retention lies within employee engagement. Gallup researcher Kevin Kruse published a study that went viral in Forbes that basically looked at the statistical relationship between a number of commonly held beliefs within society, such as the impact of alcohol and aggressive behavior, or the instance of smoking and how likely a person is to get diagnosed with lung cancer. And he found resoundingly that employee engagement is the most powerful indicator and controllable with regards to customer satisfaction. The challenge is that when there's a bunch of companies trying to solve for a big, costly problem all at the same time, it creates conditions in the market where the market has become oversaturated with solutions and vendors claiming that their solution is the number one way to fix your engagement needs. And unfortunately, a lot of HR practitioners find it difficult to decipher what will make the biggest impact at their unique organization. And they end up spending a lot of time discussing what they should do rather than executing. However, if you take a step back and actually look at what the biggest areas are to impact engagement, it's clear that recognition is the simplest way to improve morale and employee engagement. Every other year, Aon puts out a study that ranks the top engagement opportunities. Rewards and recognition has consistently been linked as the top driver of engagement year over year. However, not all recognition is created equal. Absolutely nothing in life works unless if it's regular. Learning, training your dog, communicating with your partner. You would never expect to transform your body through exercise going to the gym 6 times a year. Your employees are no different. In order to have a sustaining, lasting impact on engagement, there's a mountain of scientific evidence clearly showing that recognition has to be frequent. And the way we think about recognition frequency needs to change in the sense that all of the wonderful benefits of recognition in terms of an uplift in performance, engagement, etc., are unfortunately extremely short-lived, much shorter than organizations previously assumed. When you look at the neuroscience of what happens in the brain when someone receives a recognition, it's clear that although there's a little uptick of dopamine and that results in an emotional high, it's gone almost as soon as it came. That's why Gallup recommends praise to occur every 7 days. Our benchmark for recognition sent per employee per month is 1. Now, Phoebe, I know a lot of your customer portfolio, as you mentioned, is retailers. I would love to hear your thoughts on what nuances or retail-specific considerations you think are significant to point out before we get into the specific best practices Coborn has been employing.
Yeah, I'd love to. And to take a quick step back, I feel like one of the most commonly misunderstood concepts when it comes to recognition and engagement within retail can really be addressed by defining the different types of recognition. So we can think about there being 3 levels of recognition. When I partner with different customers, we always start the conversation with what they're currently offering their employees today. So the first is what we like to call recognition 1.0. For a long time, the prevailing method of recognizing and rewarding employees involved only years of service programs, which, although they can play a part in company culture, they're infrequent, they're top-down programs, and that's really been proven that it's not enough to transform culture or impact business outcomes. When the market realized that awarding employees only for tenure wasn't really effective, many companies adopted this 2.0 model where they still celebrated years of service, but also had a mix of nomination-based rewards, such as giving managers gift cards to give out or allowing them extra budget for spot bonuses, things like that. However, this approach is still very top-down and tends to be heavily focused on rewards, which is often made up of ad hoc programs, which can differ across business units, locations, managers, etc. And again, from an employee perspective, you're lucky to have one or two of these recognition moments a year, which is not making an impact, unfortunately. And the biggest challenge and indicator that an organization in this 2.0 phase typically sees is low recognition frequency and low non-monetary peer-to-peer recognition. It's important, especially in retail, when we're talking about high turnover and employee populations that tend to be very diverse, for positive behavior and value reinforcement to happen as frequently as possible. But you can't really do that without decoupling the reward from the recognition piece. So that kind of brings us to the Recognition 3.0 engagement strategy. This really contains all of the more traditional top-down recognition programs I spoke to, like years of service and nomination-based awards. However, this model really focuses on frequent, non-monetary peer-to-peer recognition that employees from any job level can take the lead on. And Achievers works with a lot of retailers from around the world. Some of them are small, some of them are as large as about 300,000 employees. And we specialize in helping them make that cultural transformation, where rewards and recognition, again, are decoupled. One component of the offering that our customers found really valuable is that they have direct line of sight into how other retailers similar to their size are performing, so they can make benchmarks from the start and make sure that they're on par as their program progresses. So from about September 2018 to September 2019, the average adoption across the retail segment of our customer base was about 84%. That's actually pretty typical across all of our customers, but there are a few nuances that I want to point out that are unique, particularly to retail. The first has to do with non-monetary peer-to-peer recognition. A lot of time when I'm consulting with new customers or even more tenured customers about setting their goals around recognitions, I make the recommendation that we should be aiming for at least one recognition per employee per month. And I'll hear things back like, oh my God, there's no way we can afford rewarding one recognition per month. It's just totally out of our budget. But with retail specifically, we find the most successful programs, if let's say we're defining success as increased engagement or customer satisfaction and retention, have a focus on ensuring that employees are embracing and sending non-monetary recognitions because, as Bree pointed out earlier, they're just as impactful. You get that same dopamine hit, whether it has a cash incentive tied to it or not. So the second point worth noting is the annual reward spend per employee for retail is about 30% lower than what Achievers sees across our entire customer base. We typically see a reward spend that reflects the average pay grade of the employee demographic the customer is working with, meaning when the typical pay for a frontline employee is lower, the reward component tends to be lower. So, for example, our healthcare customers who have specialized higher paid employees tend to spend more per employee than the average retail customer. So ultimately, we're using these benchmarks to give each customer a sense of where they sit in comparison to similar companies. However, when a program is successful enough, we can start to benchmark against themselves in conjunction. And at Coborn's, we definitely refer to industry averages when we're brainstorming together, but I think Tara could say we also focus on our own metrics on a quarter over quarter basis. And some of those that have been a main focus have been monthly active users and recognition coverage, which is the percent of their population that's sending recognition as an indicator of their program success. We also do a lot of work to map back the ROI of the program on metrics outside of the program itself and HR. We want to be pulling in different arms of the business as we go. Since working with Coborn's, I've tried to be the best partner for Tara and her team, and a lot of times that means trying to be a step ahead of what their business needs based on real life changes, which includes heavy part-time population, changes in leadership, and a lot of other factors that can add interesting layers to promoting a platform like Kudos. And one example that Coborn's CHRO spoke to in past years at our annual conference involved us mapping their manager sent recognition activity to their turnover data. We found that when managers were recognizing 1.8 times more than their average colleague, turnover decreased by 40%. This was really, really exciting for them. But I'd say that this is just one of the handful of case studies that we've partnered on to tie their recognition activity to larger engagement as well as other business goals. So I'd love for Tara to share from her perspective and tell us how we've partnered to kind of move the needle on some of Coborn's strategic goals, like retention and engagement. And Tara, I know there's been a lot of factors of changes that have affected your business over the last few years. So maybe you can get us started with how you brought Coborn's into a place of reevaluating your recognition program to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Phoebe. And I just want to call out Phoebe as a phenomenal partner. So she's doing a wonderful job. So, I found it interesting earlier, Bree had painted the picture of some retailers really thriving and growing in our current environment and some retailers really struggling. We're definitely in the former category, not that we don't have challenges, but we have experienced considerable growth, both through acquisition and new locations over the last decade, going from a fairly slow-moving family grocer to a fast-moving retailer. Culture used to be way easier to manage when we were smaller and everyone grew up together, so to speak. However, now that we're faced with the challenges of aligning 9,200 employees, over 130 locations, over 4 states at the same time, we're trying to align our top-level leadership. And we've really grown and learned to cope with continuously assimilating our new employee populations. We've had to shift our thinking in terms of what we're doing to empower employees to participate in building our culture. So it's more of a ground-up initiative rather than a top-down. And our recognition program is a great example of how we've done just that. So although I wasn't here in 2015, I wasn't with the company in 2015 when we partnered with Achievers to launch our employee recognition program, I know that we originally made the investment for 2 key reasons. First, it was more tactical in that as our employee base grew, we knew there was a need to consolidate all of our disparate recognition and reward programs that were being run across the business on an ad hoc and manual basis so that the employee experience was more standardized and we were setting ourselves up to build a culture of recognition as we grew, and we really needed a centralized place for our people to recognize each other. And our second goal, we were looking to drive what was a needed mechanism to align our employees to our mission and values so that we were more than just words on the page. We knew to elevate our business to the next level, we had to focus on ensuring everyone was rallying around those behaviors on a daily basis, which is exactly what our program, which we named Kudos, has done for us. And although the program definitely has delivered on our original goals through the years, we found that the platform is much broader than the rewards and recognition. We've received much more than we thought we would get when we went into this in 2015. And now when we're launching any kind of employee or cultural initiative, or there's any kind of strategic or departmental level objective that surfaces as a priority, we look at ways we can leverage our recognition platform in order to get us to our goal. Which brings me to our first best practice, which is in order to be in a place where recognition can truly elevate your business in a meaningful way, it has to be continuously tied to the overarching goals of the business. But that can't be done unless the following conditions are met. And I'm not just talking about setting up an online recognition program where you have your core values set as your recognition criteria. And I know that may sound vague, so I want to break this down into exactly what I mean by exploring 3 conditions that I think need to be met in order for that to happen. In general, HR needs to have visibility into emerging business priorities. We need to be able to recognize how we can leverage to drive behavior, and someone needs to be an influencer within the organization. So in order to position yourself to get measurable ROI on your recognition strategy and continuously link it to overall business goals, the program owner must not serve in a siloed role. It's mission critical for the program champion to not only understand the entire landscape of the company, but to be connected to what's going on. So you're really able to constantly reevaluate what's relevant to the business that recognition could help drive. And one reason our program sits with me in learning and development is because we're already very involved in a lot of key conversations due to the nature of our function. Without a seat at the table and without the visibility on emerging priorities and challenges of the business, opportunities to leverage the power of the program can be missed easily. So one example is that earlier this year, this spring, we were launching a training around inventory management. And we found that our back rooms really needed to be cleaned up. We had a 5S initiative, but this is not our back room, by the way. But I wouldn't doubt if some of our back rooms looked scary.
It's like after an earthquake.
Yeah. But some back rooms, and those of you in retail know, your back rooms can look real scary real quick if you don't have a process. And we really needed, in order for that training we were doing around inventory management, we really needed employees to get engaged in the process. And we knew that one thing they could do and get involved in was to help clean up those back rooms and get them to meet the standards that we hold. So we created a campaign called #BehindTheScenes, where everyone was cleaning up and they were submitting before and after pictures of their cleanup. And they were using the hashtag #BehindTheScenes in their recognitions. Over 300 frontline employees were recognized in 1 month, and even more importantly, we were really pleased to find a lot of indicators in the subsequent engagement survey that those employees really found value in making sure that their back room was cleaned up, and that it made their job easier. It made keeping out of stocks down easier. It made inventory management and ordering easier, and employees felt a sense of pride in that. And it may seem like a small thing, but being able to use our recognition platform to drive that kind of very tactical behavior has been one reason that Kudos is so successful, is because we can leverage it to get people to move, and it has an absolute operational impact. So a second consideration that I think we as businesses have to have in place is to tie recognition to our overall strategy in a meaningful way, and it has to do with the fact that the program owner has to understand how recognition can be leveraged to drive that behavior and support those cultural initiatives and so on. So there's a great deal of scientific evidence that shows what gets recognized, especially in a transparent public manner, gets repeated. And it's been proven no different in our business. We see that over and over again. When we can recognize in public, we help reinforce that behavior. We have a lot of examples to show how to drive behavior, but one that we just wrapped up with the World Series is that when we were looking to drive profit margins through increasing our sales of our private or owned brands, we were launching a new brand called That's Smart. And this was a really fun campaign that targeted our grocery locations and had an element of gamification and competition, in that we really we built up to the World Series that was happening, and we did a bracket-style competition. The goal was to drive sales of our private brands at each location, and the locations with the highest sales moved to the next round. Overall, we saw huge adoption of that SMART, really an ownership from our employees, getting involved in creative merchandising and also sales techniques, and really getting excited about the competition. That label had a better launch than any of our previous private label launches, and we continue to see great results from that. And it really blew our initial sales projections for the first few months out of the water when we rolled that out. So we've really been able to drive value through this campaign, and all that time we're also helping our employees feel connected across the company. So they're also getting a glimpse into the fact that they're not alone in their location and that we're working together on something. It was a great campaign. The last condition that needs to be met in order to ensure that you're tying recognition to your emerging goals and strategy of the business has to do with the fact that the program owner must not just be an administrator. They really need to be able and willing to step up and act as an internal influencer who continuously sells the program. So although we really have a high adoption across the organization and our executives really get excited when we have wins, they are busy and they are operators and they pay attention to a lot of other things, not just recognition. So we have to regularly remind our C-suite why the participation matters, show them the data, and help drive adoption across the executives. Some, admittedly, are better than others, but like most things in life, it's not as easy as just telling them once why we invested in the program and how it can help elevate their areas of business. When we have new ROI stories and anecdotes about the program and how it's impacted our bottom line business results, I'm responsible for circulating those stories, making sure I'm inserting those into conversations across the organization, and everyone being really aware of how Kudos plays into our success as a business. So the next best practice, I believe, has to be central for your recognition strategy to having a meaningful, lasting impact on culture, engagement, and business. Has to do with the fact that recognition programs simply do not work as a launch it and leave it approach. Achievers has partnered with us very closely to adopt some of their best practices for ongoing program health, and I'm going to go through two of those with you to provide some color about how they play out within our environment. But we absolutely do not take a launch it and leave it approach with Kudos. It is a daily part of our work here at Coborn. So the first way that we make sure we're not launching it and leaving it is that recognition, the platform itself, getting active on the platform has become part of our onboarding process for new hires. It doesn't matter what department, location, job function a new team member is stepping into. Everyone concludes their first week with an understanding of what Kudos is, why we have it, how to use it, how to access it on their laptop or on their on the computer at work or on their mobile device, and then best practices for how to send a recognition. We've already had a really impressively high activation rate for retail. We're really proud of our stats, but simply incorporating that into our standard onboarding process last year resulted in us boosting our activation from 89 to 96%. So 96% of our mostly offline retail population is active on the platform, is activated, and knows how to use it. So the other way that we make sure that this stays alive in our locations and across the company is that we have assigned and we have program or Kudos champions. They are responsible for making sure that the location stays engaged and excited about the program. They're responsible for helping us communicate updates to the program and creating campaigns and getting those kicked off location-based campaigns. So one of the things that we've committed to is that each location gets an annual budget for running their own location-specific campaigns, and that has gone a long way to them really taking full ownership of the platform. So they are making sure everyone's motivated, and they really help us drive that why, and that is key at each location. So whether you're looking at total reward strategy from the world at work, third-party analyst data, or other academic journals, it's really clear that recognition is a central component to a comprehensive engagement strategy. Our business is no different, which is why we've placed a special emphasis on mapping our recognition data with our engagement and turnover scores to help us inform us where we can best optimize our resources. We love the data analysis that Achievers is able to provide for us. They are phenomenal partners in helping us tell the real value story. So for example, we found that when recognition coverage for a particular location is strong, the engagement at that location tends to be higher. And even though the leadership team and our HR department, we know this to be the case, we're not the people in the business who are best equipped to do anything about it. We really need to be able to engage our location managers and our people leaders to really do something about it. We have found that teams receiving more frequent recognition have better engagement scores. Teams with positive engagement scores also feel more value through that recognition. And then teams who feel value through recognition rarely think about looking for a job elsewhere. So just to connect those dots for you, that means when recognition goes up in a location, engagement goes up and turnover goes down, and people are more settled in their workplace. It's a phenomenal result, but we're able to prove it through the data that we pull. So we've made these dashboards. We actually have an HR dashboard we use Power BI, where we're pulling data from a number of different pieces all into one dashboard. And we've created landing pages for that dashboard just for our Kudos data. So you can get analytics for Kudos on the platform, and it's fantastic. But this pulls it into a place where they can also be looking at their turnover numbers, their workers' comp claims, et cetera. They have an opportunity to look at all their data in one spot. So this is available to our managers so they can have visibility on how they're stacking up in terms of key success metrics compared to the rest of the company. We've also found the dashboards are super easy to use, and managers can filter it by date and so on. And we found the real trick is in educating them and then reminding them about the why this information is important. So we look at this data. My team looks at this data once a month and prepares a monthly summary, and we send that out in our HR news and helps to draw attention to things that we see as real successes. We set goals at the beginning of the year and remind people how we're doing in relation to the goal. So our goal this year was to get to, I think, 61% recognition coverage. We're so close. We can taste it, as you can see here. And to get our activation rate to 96%, again, really close. So we help drive attention through our summaries, but then the location managers and leaders can go in and look at the slide and see for themselves how they're doing. They also have the opportunity then to look at this when they're trying to figure out why is their turnover going up. Well, they can look at all the other data, including this recognition data for their location. And recognition data tends to be something that they can easily control. They can easily put a campaign together and help drive attention at their location. So it's something that they have a lot of control over that makes a big impact. And I think that's the end of the best practices that I have for us today.
That was a lot to unpack. Tara, I love that. You shared so much good stuff. I see that the chat box is flashing with some questions. Before we put you back on the spot to answer some of these questions, a lot of them look to be directed at you. I'd love to summarize kind of the three best practices you shared, and you keep me honest. Tell me if I'm summarizing these accurately. If a retail organization is interested in setting themselves up to elevate their employee engagement strategy and get a meaningful return on investment on recognition, first and foremost, it's imperative to continuously look for ways to tie in the emerging business goals and employee initiatives into the overarching recognition strategy. And it sounds like you can't do that unless HR has a seat at the table and direct line of sight into what challenges the business is facing, as well as HR needs an understanding of how recognition can be leveraged strategically to drive specific behaviors across the business, whether it's bolstering sales of a specific product suite or encouraging associates to clean up the back room. In the examples that you shared, I think it's a really salient point that a comprehensive recognition strategy has to include has to be HR leaders have to understand that recognition can and should be used as a behavior engine because what gets recognized gets repeated. I also love what you said about the program owner needing to be an influencer within the organization. Who says that HR doesn't include sales? Secondly,
every day.
Yeah, right? No one told you that in college. Secondly, if the goal is to drive business outcomes outside of HR and really transform culture, launching a program like this and leaving it isn't going to cut it. I love to hear that you have embraced our best practice of embedding kudos into your onboarding program and that you're optimizing the success and usage of the program by leveraging program champions so strategically. I think that out of everything you shared, my favorite was about the importance of using data to inform your engagement strategy and that on that real-time basis. I personally I think that um, you guys are a stellar example of how this can be done, and it's probably one of the many reasons why over the last 3 years you've been recognized as one of the top 50 most engaged workplaces in the country and have seen such strong business results. Um, Tara, how did I do in that summary? I feel like you unpacked so much. Did I miss anything?
I know, I feel like I just fire hosed everybody. But no, I think your summary was great, and I would absolutely say that keeping this a regular weekly topic that we're talking about and thinking about is part of being able to execute on all of those best practices. And the reasons we're able to do that is that we have such a great partner in Phoebe, and the Achievers representative that we work directly with plays such a vital role in us being able to have visibility and execute on all of those best practices because she's helping us to keep all of that in mind as we have very busy workloads in addition to this platform.
Oh, Phoebe, recognition moment. She's like, the check's in the mail, Tara.
Tyler could you from my company, Phoebe.
Yeah. I love it. So we have time for a couple of questions. Tara, I hope you are ready to be back in the hot seat. I love this first question. Curious to know, so early in the presentation, there was a slide where Phoebe was sharing the average recognition activity within Coborn, and I think this question is referring to that. Curious to know if you think 1.6 recognitions per employee per month is too much and actually serves to diminish the value of the recognition. Oof, good one.
Well,
yeah, think about that.
I think the index is an interesting statistic. I think it's a great kind of benchmark to pay attention to, but it's not the only benchmark to pay attention to. So the last year or two, we've really shifted where we want to make sure the index is staying high, but we're way more interested in making sure that our coverage is high because you could have an index of 10 that is just an average, but maybe only half your employees are receiving all of those recognitions, and you've got half of your employees who aren't. So we pay close attention to our recognition coverage per month. I would also say, similar to what you were talking about earlier, it's like anything else. If you aren't doing it regularly and consistently, it doesn't have impact. So if you were only exercising 1.6 times a month, you're not going to see any progress. Similar to recognition, people, in order to feel valued, need to feel that probably weekly, if not more often. And so we try and set realistic goals, given that we're a retail environment and we don't necessarily, our managers aren't necessarily seeing people, but that's also why we encourage peer-to-peer recognition because anybody in the company can recognize anyone else for good work that they see. And it all makes a difference in helping us drive our culture and drive our business results.
I love that. And the other thing I was Go ahead, Phoebe. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, and one thing I would just add to Tara's perfect answer, but is it also one key thing that goes along with index is also making sure that it's following best practice in the criteria of the recognition, right? We want to see frequent recognition, but we don't want to see people just sending, 2 words within the message of the recognition saying thank you. If it's detailed, if it's immediate, and if it's specific to exactly what that person does, it really drives further, drives the impact a lot further than, let's just say, someone giving a very brief thanks, So I would say just the message and the criteria of the recognition is just as, if not more important than the frequency of them as well.
Yeah, it's like, because all of the recognitions are value based, like reflecting those specific behaviors that you want to see amplified. It's not like people are thanking each other for arbitrary things like bringing in donuts, although I wouldn't mind a donut right now. Phoebe, this is a really good question. Can you speak to how many administrators are typically required to oversee this type of program?
Sure. Yeah, I would say it differs from company to company depending on size. Tara has a small but mighty team that works with her, and I'm sure she wishes she has had more people at some point, but they do an amazing job. I would say a team of about 3. I have also, so the larger the organization, typically the bigger their team. The biggest team I see is about 4 people, but then I, on the flip side, see one person overseeing all their platform for anything less than about 3,000 employees, I would say. But that person also could oversee multiple other programs as well. So my job is really to understand the bandwidth of the main point of contact and make sure that even if it is just one person overseeing the program, that we're putting together a strategic plan and pulling in an executive sponsor in order to drive a lot of those outlined or the goals that they're looking for home. So regardless of how big the team is, I think there's still definitely a way to make sure that we're making a huge impact, even if this is just one of many things on someone's plate.
Nice. I think that we have time for squeeze in one more question. And I'm going to select this one for Tara. By the way, all of the questions that we don't have time to get to here today, we will have a representative from Achievers reach out and make sure that everyone's questions got answered. I see we're not going to quite get through all of them. But final question for good measure for Tara. How often do you find your employees are gaming the system and recognizing their friends? That's a really common question.
It doesn't happen very often because it's such a public platform. There's a ton of visibility, and so it's really obvious if you're gaming the system, and people are going to catch on. So it self-polices quite a bit, and when the self-policing doesn't work, our kudos champions, which are usually our HR generalists at our locations, are paying attention and having conversations offline with those folks about that. So it really isn't as common as you would think. But when it does happen, we're able to see it and take care of it really quickly.
Nice. I like that. Self-policing. Oh my gosh, you guys, I cannot thank you enough, Phoebe and Tara and everyone on the line, for joining us. Today, I feel like we squeezed in a lot in our hour, talking, kind of contextualizing why engagement is relevant now more than ever, how recognition impacts engagement, aka it's got to be frequent. Doing it a couple times a year ain't gonna cut it. And lastly, digging into those top 3 recognition best practices and the conditions that need to be met in order to execute on those in reality. Everyone, please do me a favor and have an amazing rest of your week. And thank you so much.